AIX is desperately trying to find a match for Cian Shields, and Felipe Drugovich, finally back in single-seaters, has impressed the whole world by scoring on his Formula E debut. Hello and welcome fellow motorsports fans. Between those two series, an action-packed week of Italian F4, the road to Indy, and some wicked junior racing at Snetterton, we've got lots to cover, so let's not waste any more time. In Italian F4, we've had a further shake-up of the Prema hegemony of the first couple of rounds, and still no signs of life from Thomas Stolzemanis, which makes me incredibly sad. Either way, it was finally Alex Powell's opportunity to shine, a double victory and 3 podium appearances to hopefully begin turning his season around. A title bid may be highly unlikely, but he is at least back ahead of teammate Emanuele Oliveri. The latter really had a bit of a disappointing weekend considering the pace of the RSGP machines. And this does give me hope for the upcoming Euro 4 campaign, a good opportunity to put a title on your CV with just a short run of good form. KNB still proved that he is the authority at Prema, no questions asked, comfortably beating struggling Sebastian Weldon at every step of the way to still increase his gap in the championship further. So instead, I do want to highlight the return of Rino Franco. The Dutchman has looked a tiny bit underwhelming in his Spanish F4 campaign so far. Not bad by any means, but not the regular podium contender he had surely expected to be. But here, he immediately put his PHM machine on the podium twice in super convincing fashion, really doing everything in his power to make rookie teammate DCC look a bit bad if I'm honest. I will say this did give me a lot of hope for Franco going forward, someone who was by all accounts one of the breakout drivers last season in this very championship. Gabriel Gomez being the clear-cut lead driver at US Racing is not news anymore at this stage, but I still want to shout out the improvement of the people around him. In particular, Lucas Amalisto and Andrea Kostic, both of which have managed to string together a pretty consistent point-scoring run, even if this weekend was a bit of a poor example in Kostic's case. The pace was still very much there. And Samalisto, of course, is by now actually firmly established in that upper midfield group ever since he sorted out whatever went wrong at Vallelunga. In contrast, Maxime Rehm continues to be super hit or miss in rather disappointing fashion. Before the season, I would have expected him to be the closest competition to Gomez, and I still think he should be like the second or third best driver of the team on paper, but he just isn't showing up the way he needs to. He does appear to have plenty of budget to work with, so at least I'd assume this shouldn't hinder his progress up the ladder. I am not ready to give up on the guy just yet. We've had racing action at Snetterton as well, starting with GB4, where this year's breakout driver Ari Bansal put in some excellent work, smashing both regular grid races to reel in Daniel Ginchard just a little bit in the championship battle. The elite trio may remain closely matched on paper, but that was a proper statement weekend from Bansal as far as I'm concerned, further adding to his often shown overtaking ability as well as the pace displayed since his British F4 debut. Kid is really exciting in my opinion. Get on the hype train while it's still nice and empty. There was one caveat to Bansal's weekend though. A lap 1 wreck in the reverse grid race to cost him some potentially vital points. But that crash hardly had room to make the headlines. Instead, all the talk was rightfully about Liam Wilson taking both his own maiden victory and the first win in the series for Arden as a squad. It may only be the reverse grid race, but he did have to work for that one, putting in a fantastic start to storm to the front before fending off Jack Taylor until the checkered flag. Wilson may have been a slightly anonymous midfielder so far, and considering that it's his second year already, I doubt this drive will change his momentum significantly, but still, credit where credit is due. I really wish the broad female roster in the series was a little better. 6 women on the grid this weekend, and not a single one of them was unfortunately able to impress. I don't like making pessimistic comments, but let's just say whoever wins that F1 Academy seat this year will not at all be able to properly replace Alicia Pomowski. That said, most of them are young and very inexperienced, even compared to Pomowski, so maybe someone like Megan Bruce or Lily Mae Watkins may still grow into single-seater racing later down the line. I just wouldn't bet any money on it if I'm honest. We can keep the Ginetta Juniors segment short as, to be honest, the look at the front is very much the same it has been all season. Rocco Coronel as the clear emerging star driver, Fred Green giving him a decent run for his money, Alfie Slater as a regular podium contender but not quite up to the task of handling the rookies, and Scott Lindblom as fast as always but with a tendency to get into trouble. There have really been two key highlights. Joseph Smith, by now firmly a part of the aforementioned lead quartet and consistently impressing race after race. And, maybe more importantly, former karting star Harry Bartle finally scoring his first podium. Certainly not an easy feat for the pace performance driver considering the absolute dominance from the sizable Elite Motorsport and R-Racing lineups. Unfortunately, Katrina E has still not managed to impact any of these races so far. TGM might really suck as a squad, but at least Josh Watts is able to make himself seen, something Katrina E can only dream of at this point. I sincerely hope she returns next season. She might not be a world beater, but I very much expected her to be better than, well, potentially the single worst driver on the grid at this stage. In Formula E, the dust has settled and Oliver Rowland is crowned world champion with one whole doubleheader to spare. Pascal Wehrlein did give it a good go, but ultimately the gap was too big to overcome already. And looking back at the first half of the season, this title is of course more than deserved. So many flawless weekends will pay off eventually. The new world champion might dominate the headlines, but we can't overlook the weekend Jaguar has had either. Mitch Evans and Nick Cassidy taking turns on the top step of the podium, and in Cassidy's case, in classic energy management mastery fashion, the look we've not really gotten to see nearly enough of over the year. With lots of roster rumours circulating, I can't wait to see where the Kiwi ends up. He does deserve another chance at the title, doesn't he? I want to highlight someone who should be close to our feeder series fans' hearts. Felipe Drugovich making his debut, replacing WEC-occupied Nick De Vries for the weekend. And while we have often talked about how tricky this particular series appears to be for rookies, Drugovich handled it like it's no problem at all. Sure, he did get a taste of the scrappy FE racing on Saturday, but scoring points on debut while beating experienced Mortara was still hugely impressive to watch. Add to that the very racy look he presented, and it should be reason enough to get excited over Drugovich potentially entering the silly season conversation. I for one would love to see the Brazilian return to single-seaters, and I know I'm not alone with that. And a shout out to end on, Robin Freins may have been having a shocking season, as is envisioned as a team, but do not get confused by his lack of points on the board this week, and this was still one of the strongest performances he's shown all year, I reckon, and I do think it shouldn't go entirely unnoticed. For IndyNXT's second oval round, the big story is of course the maiden victory for former USF Pro 2000 champ Miles Rowe, finding yet another level during his rather successful campaign this season. It does feel like he's slowly putting together all the pieces better and better, and, combined with Lucky Shoe's rough day, might just find himself in the battle for P2 after all. Again, for anyone doubting the strength of this IndyNXT grid, I reckon you'll find it rather difficult to downplay the ability of the current top 5. For Dennis Hauger, P2 must almost feel like a disappointment. And it was the exact same pattern we had observed at Gateway as well, leading most of the laps but collapsing in a late race battle for the win. Thus, we must once again ask the question, is this a tyre management issue? While it should be a strength of his on road courses with his extensive F2 background, it still strikes me as the most logical explanation to see this emerge as a pattern on the ovals. Hopefully, we'll get more clarity when it's time for Milwaukee. IndyCar at short ovals is always a treat to watch, and Iowa was no different. Alex Palou's second ever oval win, Pato Award finally back on the top step of the podium, a great all-around day for Penske on Saturday, and Marcus Armstrong, who I've just praised last week, back on the podium for the second ever time were just some of the headlines. I'll admit, my attention was firmly on some of the younger guns on the grid, in particular the renewed fantastic oval performances from Christian Rasmussen. In his case, so obviously the team's only strength, as well as David Malukas and Santino Ferrucci taking turns to impress for AJ Foyt. Malukas would have really deserved a podium finish in that last race. Strategy chaos may have put a stop to that, but I reckon he was still a contender for driver of the day. Two other teams look more and more like oval specialists as well. Juncos Hollinger and, quite surprisingly, series newcomers Prema. Seeing Connor Daly as a podium contender in both races was quite cool to see. He may not exactly be a star driver, but put him in a good car around an oval and he'll put his experience to good use. Meanwhile, in Prema's case, there might not be any experience to speak of from driver or team, but it was still enough chaos to put Robert Schwartzman up to a new PB of a P9 on Sunday. The aforementioned late race strategy chaos may be a bit of a caveat, but to be fair, there's an argument to be made that he could have finished even higher up without it. One reoccurring shout out to end on: Nolan Siegel may have once again cost himself the chance at a good result, putting it in a wall on Saturday and resulting in a DNS on Sunday, but he has still shown excellent pace in both quali and race until he ruined it himself. P21 in the standings may look really bad, though that is still on par with veteran Marcus Ericsson, mind you, but the kid is clearly developing at a steady rate and the results will surely follow eventually. For the first time since January, there actually wasn't a big international karting race for me to cover this week. And I didn't manage to catch up with the British Championship yet, so we'll have to skip the karting report today. But we do have a rather early return of our new segment since AIX has already announced their first F2 driver for 2026, current Eurocup 3 midfielder Emerson Fittipaldi. As that introduction already suggests, I'm not particularly excited about this move, not at all to be entirely honest. Skipping F3 may appear to be a viable move at the moment, and I'm in no position to really argue against it, but I don't think this applies to drivers that have shown little potential so far in their careers. Not to say Fittipaldi is entirely bad, I reckon he is a bit more appropriate than Cian Shields at least, but in no way is he a driver that should be expected to do anything but be a backmarker on the F2 level, even if he has been slowly getting better. People will be quick to jump on the Dirksen example, but as I have reminded people constantly last season, Dirksen was by no means a terrible driver before that surprising step up. He had a good stint in Italian F4 and was stuck driving for a backmarker outfit in Freca in which he still comfortably handled his teammates. Of course, he still drastically outperformed expectations in F2, but we knew there was at least some talent is the point. Emma Fittipaldi meanwhile has nearly nothing to show after 3 years on the Formula Regional level. A 5th last year may look decent on paper, but only until you realise he still had 3 teammates ahead of him and he was never a relevant piece in the championship battle. Thus, not gonna lie, this announcement is as underwhelming as it is on brand for AIX. I do hope they put some proper talent in that second seat at least. But since we're at the end of this episode anyway, this is the time where you should jump to the comments to let me know I'm wrong, together with all your other thoughts and opinions so we can get our lovely little discussion going. And otherwise, I thank you all for watching and I do hope to catch you in the next one.